There are a number of cases where it seems true that something is not the case, and this can be quite important to us. So to give you a mundane example, if you're on a diet, it might be important to you that your soft drink is sugar-free. And this seems to be attributing what I would call a negative property to it. It's saying something that it doesn't have. The status of such a property seems quite mysterious. Okay, so it's true of you, for instance, that you're 5 feet 10 inches tall, and I'd say that's a property or quality that you have. But there's also another set of properties, right? So if you're 5 feet 10 inches tall, it's also true of you that you're not 5 feet 11 inches tall. Now, is this a genuine property that you have? Here's an argument that says it's not. If you're 5 feet 10 inches tall, then we can say that you're not 5 feet 11 inches tall. But then you're also not 6 feet, not 6 feet 1, not 6 feet 2. If there would be these negative properties, it seems you'd have to have an infinite number of them. So that straight away is telling you that there's something fishy about them. But then again, how many regular positive properties do you have anyway? I mean, if I started writing down your properties, I suggest I could just go on forever anyway, and the only limit to my list would probably be the limits of my imagination. So if you're going to say there's something dodgy about negative properties because there's an infinite number of them, then you'd have to know, well, there seems to be an infinite number of positive properties anyway. So that shows it starts to become very difficult to rule out these cases of negative existence. Okay, so the other area that really worries me, and this may be a more general case of the negative properties, is the case of negative truths. So it's true of this room that there's a chair in it. Okay, so the statement, there's a chair in this room, seems to be true. And what makes it true? What makes it true is the chair. So it's a physical object in the world, makes true the statement, there's a chair in the room. But here's the problem. It's also true that there's not a hippopotamus in this room, that there's not a giraffe in the room, that Barack Obama is not in the room, and so on. So we've got all these negative truths. But what makes them true? So in the positive case, it was a physical object, the chair, making it true that there's a chair in the room. What is it in the case of the negative truths that makes them true? So this is an old problem. Bertrand Russell discussed it. I think it's one of the things that led him to fall out with Wittgenstein. But Wittgenstein wouldn't concede it was true that there wasn't a hippopotamus in the room. But I think maybe Wittgenstein had a point against Russell, because it doesn't seem that there is anything in the world making it true, in which case we might start to doubt whether it is true. What sort of thing could it be that would make those negative truths true? Here's one idea. There's a kind of negative hippopotamus, or this room has a property of non-hippopotamus containing, right? So you'd be kind of invoking the existence of a nothingness, a kind of non-existence, to explain this truth of there not being a hippopotamus in the room. Now that seems to me to be getting into some very dodgy metaphysical territory. If you start treating nothingness as if it's something, you're prepared to give it some kind of reality.
You said a moment ago, there's not a hippopotamus in the room. What makes that true? Does it not make it true that you and I can conduct a search of this room to an agreed set of standards, not find a hippopotamus, and then say, it was true, your statement was true. And yes, there are an infinite number of statements you could make. There's not 2 hippopotami, there's not 3 hippopotami, but they could all be proven true. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with my logic there?
Well, the problem we have in relation to this is that it's very hard to prove a negative. Okay, now in the case of the hippopotamus, you may feel a high degree of confidence that if you give my room a cursory inspection and fail to find a hippopotamus, then you may be pretty sure. Because the problem is that there could be a hidden hippopotamus, or it could be something less conspicuous. So the problem is that while I can find a chair and be confident that that verifies my statement there's a chair in the room, when it's a negative, when I'm trying to prove a negative, the problem is that for all I know, I failed to find the thing in question, but it could have just escaped my notice. Okay, so I noticed there was a whole cluster of problems around these negatives. So another problem that really interested me was the so-called cases of causation by absence.